I didn't plan on sharing a hotel room with Connor. Hell, I didn't even plan on going to that city with him in the first place. But somehow, a week later, I was standing in the middle of a small hotel room, staring at a single bed, trying to act like this wasn't the worst or maybe the most dangerous idea we'd ever had. It started way more casually than that. Connor and I had known each other for about a year. Same university, same major, same group of friends, but we'd never been that close. Not at first. He was the kind of guy everyone liked without trying, confident, a little sarcastic, always relaxed like nothing could really get to him. I was not that. I kept things more contained. Thought things through. Overthought, actually. Still, over time, we started talking more. Late nights after classes, random coffee runs, complaining about assignments. It felt easy. Too easy. And then one day, out of nowhere, he said, "Hey, I need to go to Cluj for a couple days. You want to come?" I remember laughing at first. Why would I go with you? He shrugged like it was obvious. Road trip. Change of scenery. You've been stressed as hell lately. He wasn't wrong. Midterms were killing me. I hadn't been sleeping properly, and my apartment felt like it was closing in on me. The idea of getting out, even just for a couple days, hit something in me I didn't want to admit. Still, I hesitated. "You already booked a place?" "Not yet," he said. "We'll figure it out." That should have been my first warning. The drive itself was actually kind of perfect. We left early, the city barely awake, streets still quiet. Connor was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping absent-mindedly to whatever playlist he'd thrown on. I remember watching him more than I should have. Not in an obvious way, just noticing things. The way his jaw tightened when he focused. The way he hummed under his breath when he liked a song. The way he looked completely comfortable in his own skin. It made me feel the opposite. "You're staring," he said suddenly, not even looking at me. I looked away instantly. "I'm not." He smirked. I could hear it in his voice. "Sure, Daniel." That was the thing about Connor. He didn't push too hard, but he noticed everything. By the time we got to Cluj, it was already evening. The sky was that soft orange-blue mix right before it gets dark, and the city felt different from home, busier, louder, but somehow lighter. We grabbed food first, walking through the center, talking about nothing important. It felt like one of those moments you don't realize matters until later. And then came the hotel. Connor stood at the reception desk while I hovered a few steps behind, scrolling through my phone like I wasn't paying attention. "Yeah, one room," he said casually. I looked up. The receptionist typed something, then paused. "Only double room available." Connor didn't even hesitate. "That's fine." That's when I stepped forward. "Wait, double room as in 2 beds, right?" The receptionist gave me a polite smile. "1 bed." There was a second, just a second, where everything felt weirdly still. I looked at Connor. He looked back at me, completely calm. "We'll survive." I should have said something. Should have insisted we find another place. Should have done anything other than nod like it was no big deal. But I didn't. And now here we were. The room wasn't huge. Clean, modern, nothing special. 1 bed in the center, a small desk, a window overlooking the street. Connor dropped his bag near the chair like this was the most normal situation in the world. "You taking the shower first or me?" he asked. I blinked, still standing near the door. You go." "Cool." He grabbed a t-shirt from his bag and disappeared into the bathroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Which was a mistake, because now I couldn't ignore it anymore. The fact that we were sharing a room, sharing a bed, that there was no real space to hide or pretend. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, running a hand through my hair, trying to calm the weird tension building in my chest. It wasn't just the situation. It was him. It had been building for a while, I think. Small moments, things I brushed off, things I told myself didn't mean anything. But being here, in this room, with no distractions, it felt impossible to ignore. The sound of the shower stopped. A few minutes later, the bathroom door opened, and Connor stepped out, hair damp, wearing just sweatpants, and that same careless confidence. "Your turn," he said, tossing the towel onto the chair. I stood up a little too quickly. "Yeah, right." As I walked past him, I caught a hint of his shampoo, something clean, subtle, and it hit me harder than it should have. And just for a second, I felt his eyes on me. Not casual, not distracted, focused. I paused at the bathroom door, turning slightly. He was still there, leaning against the wall, watching me. "Everything good?" he asked. I nodded, probably too fast. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't respond immediately, just held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then he smiled small, unreadable. Yeah, me too. I stepped into the bathroom and closed the door, my heart beating way faster than it should have been. And that's when it really hit me. This trip, this room, this whole situation, something about it was going to change everything. I just didn't know how yet. But I could feel it. And the worst part? A part of me didn't want to stop it. I stayed in the shower longer than I needed to. Not because I actually needed it, but because I needed a minute to get my head straight. Cold water, steady breathing, trying to convince myself that I was overthinking everything. That this was just a trip, just a room, just Connor being Connor. But even as I told myself that, I could still feel the way he looked at me before I closed the door. That hadn't been nothing. When I finally stepped out, the room felt different, quieter. Connor was sitting on the bed, leaning back on his hands, scrolling through his phone. He glanced up the second he heard the door open. And just like that, his attention was fully on me again. It was subtle. Anyone else might have missed it. But I didn't. "You take forever," he said. I rolled my eyes, grabbing my shirt. "Sorry, I like being clean." He huffed out a quiet laugh, but his gaze didn't drop right away. It lingered just long enough to make my chest tighten again. I turned away, pulling my shirt on a little too quickly. "Did you check what we're doing tomorrow?" I asked, mostly to fill the silence. "Not really," he said. "Thought we'd just walk around. See where the day goes." That sounded like him. No plan, no pressure, just going with it. We ended up going out again that night. Nothing crazy, just a bar near the center, a couple drinks, music that was just loud enough to blur the edges of everything. It should have felt normal, but it didn't, because Connor kept sitting too close. His knee brushing mine under the table, his arm occasionally bumping into mine like it was accidental, but it happened too often to really be accidental. At one point, he leaned in to say something over the music, his mouth close to my ear. "Relax, Daniel." I frowned slightly. "I am relaxed." He pulled back just enough to look at me, one eyebrow raised. "You're really not." And the worst part? He was right. By the time we got back to the hotel, it was late. The city outside had quieted down, lights softer now, everything slower. Inside the room, though, that tension was still there. Worse, actually. Connor kicked off his shoes and stretched like he didn't have a single thought in his head. "You always this tense?" he asked casually. I scoffed, grabbing a bottle of water from the desk. "Only when I'm forced to share a bed with you." That got a reaction. Not a big one, but I saw it. That slight pause. Then a smirk. "Yeah," he said. "You sure that's the problem?" I turned to him. "What's that supposed to mean?" He didn't answer right away. Just watched me. Again. That same look. Measured. Curious. Like he was trying to figure something out. Or maybe confirm it. Then he shrugged. Nothing. But it didn't feel like nothing. Getting into bed was awkward. No way around it. We both tried to act normal. Like this was just practical. Like it didn't matter who was on which side or how close we were. But the second the lights went off, everything felt louder. Every small movement. Every shift of the mattress. Every breath. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, hyper-aware of the fact that Connor was right there next to me. Too close. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. "Daniel," he said quietly. "Yeah. You overthink everything, don't you?" I let out a slow breath. "Maybe." A pause. Then, "Stop." I turned my head slightly in the dark. "Stop what?" "Whatever's going on in your head right now," he said. "It's not that serious." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one trying to ignore the way his presence felt like it was pulling something out of me I'd been keeping buried for months. I shifted onto my side, facing away from him. "Go to sleep, Connor." He didn't respond. For a few seconds, I thought that was it. That we'd just leave it there. But then, I felt it. A hand. Light. Resting against my arm. Not gripping. Not pulling. Just there. My entire body went still. "Relax," he said again, softer this time. "You're acting like I'm gonna bite you." I swallowed hard, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "You don't usually do this." "Do what?" "Touch me like that." Another pause. And then, maybe I should have started earlier. That did something to me. Something I couldn't explain away anymore. Slowly, I turned my head, just enough to look back at him. Even in the dark, I could make out his face. The outline of it. The way he was already looking at me. Like he'd been waiting for me to turn. "Connor." I started, but I didn't even know what I was going to say. He moved closer. Not suddenly. Not forcefully. Just enough that the space between us disappeared. And now I could feel everything. His breath, his warmth, the way his hand shifted slightly on my arm, still light, but more intentional now. "You ever gonna say it?" he murmured. "Or just keep pretending?" My heart was pounding so hard it felt ridiculous. "Say what?" His fingers pressed just a little more firmly, like he was grounding me there. "That you feel it too." Silence. Heavy. Real. Because I did. I had for a while. I just never let myself admit it. And now there was no space left to hide behind. I exhaled slowly. "Yeah." The word barely came out, but it was enough. Because the second I said it, everything changed. For a second, neither of us moved. It was like everything had been building to that one moment, and now that it was finally out there, neither of us rushed it. Connor was still close. Too close to pretend this was nothing. His hand was still on my arm, but now it felt different, firmer, like he wasn't testing anymore. Like he knew. "Yeah," he repeated quietly. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure he could fully see it in the dark. "Yeah." My voice sounded different. Lower. Less guarded. More honest than I was used to. There was a small shift beside me, the mattress dipping slightly as Connor moved even closer. Then his hand slid slow, deliberate, from my arm down to my wrist. He didn't grab it, just traced it lightly, like he was giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't. My breath caught instead. "Thought so," he murmured. I turned a little more, enough that we were facing each other properly now. Close enough that I could feel his breath against my lips. Close enough that it didn't make sense anymore to pretend we were just friends on a trip. "Why didn't you say anything before?" I asked. He huffed out a quiet breath, something almost like a laugh, but softer. "Same reason you didn't." That hit harder than I expected. Because he was right. I'd noticed things. Moments. Looks. The way he acted around me sometimes. But I always brushed it off. Told myself I was imagining it. Safer that way. His fingers tightened slightly around my wrist, just enough to pull my attention back to him. "You overthink everything," he said again, but there was no teasing in it now. Just honesty. "And you don't think at all." I shot back, but it came out quieter than I meant. He smiled at that. I could feel it more than see it. "Someone's got to balance you out. Or mess things up," I muttered. That made him pause. For a second, I thought maybe I'd pushed too far. But then his hand moved again, this time sliding up my arm. Slower, more certain. "If this messes things up," he said, voice low, "then it was already messed up." I didn't have a response to that. Because deep down, I knew what he meant. There was this moment. Short, but heavy. Where everything felt like it was hanging right on the edge. And then, I moved first. I don't even remember deciding to. My hand came up, hesitating for half a second before resting against his chest. Warm. Solid. Real. Connor froze for just a fraction of a second. Then his breathing changed. Not a lot, but enough. "You sure?" he asked quietly. That surprised me. I thought he'd just go for it. But instead, he was giving me the choice. Again, I swallowed, my fingers pressing slightly against his chest without thinking. "Are you?" I asked back. He didn't answer with words. His hand came up to my jaw, fingers brushing lightly along the side of my face. Slower than I expected. Careful, like he was still holding back, even now. My heart was going insane at this point. Every little movement felt amplified. Every second stretched out longer than it should have. And then, he closed the distance. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy or unsure. It was deliberate. Soft at first. Like he was testing it. Like he was making sure I wouldn't pull away. I didn't. If anything, I leaned into it. And that's when something shifted. Because the second he felt that, his hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened just slightly, still controlled, but no longer hesitant. And suddenly, everything that had been building all day, all week, maybe longer, was right there between us. Real. When we finally pulled back, it wasn't by much. Our foreheads almost touching, breath still uneven. Neither of us said anything for a second. We didn't need to, because everything had already been said, just not with words. Connor let out a quiet breath. "Yeah," he murmured, almost to himself. I exhaled slowly, my hand still resting against him. "Yeah," I echoed. We didn't rush after that. Which, honestly, I didn't expect. I thought once that line was crossed, everything would just escalate. But instead, it slowed down. More touches. Closer. More natural. Like we were figuring it out as we went. His arm wrapped around me at some point, pulling me in without thinking. And this time, it didn't feel unfamiliar. It didn't feel like something I needed to question. It just felt right. Lying there, in that quiet hotel room, with the city dim outside and Connor right there next to me, I realized something. This wasn't just about the room, or the trip, or even that moment. This had been building way before we ever got here. And now that it finally happened, there was no going back to how things were before. The only question was, what the hell we were supposed to do next. I didn't fall asleep for a long time after that. Not because anything else happened, but because my mind wouldn't shut up. Connor was still close, his arm loosely around me, like it had just settled there naturally, like it belonged there. And the weirdest part? I didn't feel tense anymore. Not like before. It was quieter in my head now. Still intense, but different. Less panic, more awareness. Like everything had shifted into focus. "You're still thinking," Connor muttered quietly. I let out a small breath. "You can tell." "Yeah," he said, voice rough with sleep. "You go stiff." I frowned slightly. "Not helpful." He huffed softly, almost amused. Then his hand moved slow, absent, just brushing lightly along my side. Not pushing anything. Not testing. Just there. "Relax," he said again, softer this time. I didn't answer. But I did. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. Because the next thing I knew, sunlight was cutting through the curtains. And the room felt warmer. And Connor was still there. Exactly where he'd been. Except now I was more aware of it. The way we were still close. The way his arm hadn't moved much. The way this wasn't just some moment in the dark anymore. This was real. Morning real. I shifted slightly, careful not to wake him. Or at least I thought I was being careful. "Daniel," he said, voice low and sleepy. I froze. "You're awake?" "Now I am." I hesitated, then let out a quiet breath. "Sorry." "For what?" I turned my head slightly, meeting his eyes. "For all of this, I guess." That made him frown. Not annoyed, just confused. "All of what?" I gestured vaguely between us. "This." He was quiet for a second. Then, "You regret it?" That hit harder than I expected. I shook my head quickly. "No. I stopped. Because I didn't actually know how to explain it." Connor shifted, propping himself up slightly on one arm. Now he was looking at me properly. Fully awake. "Then what's the problem?" he asked. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "This changes things." He didn't deny it. Didn't brush it off. Just nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "It does." That honesty made it worse and better at the same time. We stayed like that for a moment. Facing each other. No distractions. No noise. No easy way out of the conversation. "So what now?" I asked quietly. Connor studied me for a second, like he was deciding how to answer. Then he said, "We don't overcomplicate it." I almost laughed at that. "That sounds exactly like something you would say." "And you're about to do the opposite," he replied. He wasn't wrong. I looked away for a second, staring at the ceiling. "I just don't want to mess things up," I admitted. There it was. The actual truth. Connor didn't respond right away. Then I felt his hand again, this time more deliberate, resting lightly against my side. "You didn't mess anything up," he said. I turned back to him. "You don't know that." He held my gaze, steady. "I do." There was something about the way he said it. No hesitation. No doubt. Like he'd already thought about this way more than I had. "Connor," I started, but I didn't know where I was going with it. He shifted a little closer instead. Not forcing. Just closing that small gap again. "We'll figure it out," he said. Simple. Too simple. But somehow it worked. We didn't rush out of bed after that. Didn't suddenly act like everything was back to normal. Because it wasn't. But it also didn't feel broken. It felt new. Uncertain, yeah? But not wrong. Later, when we finally got up and started getting ready for the day, things were quieter between us. Not awkward. Just heavier. More aware. Every glance lasted a little longer. Every small movement felt more intentional. Like we both knew something had shifted and neither of us wanted to pretend it hadn't. As we stepped out of the hotel and into the city again, the air felt different. Or maybe it was just me. Connor walked beside me like always. Same pace. Same presence. But now, every now and then, our hands brushed. And this time, neither of us pulled away right away. I didn't know where this was going. Didn't know what it meant for when we got back home. Didn't know if this was just something that stayed in the city or something bigger. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a trip anymore. And Connor? He wasn't just Connor anymore. Not to me. The day should have felt normal. That's what I kept telling myself as we walked through the city cafes, narrow streets, people passing by like nothing had changed. But everything had. Not in some dramatic, obvious way. Just underneath. Connor was the same. At least on the surface. Same relaxed walk, hands in his pockets, occasional comments about random things we passed. Coffee? He asked at one point, nodding toward a small place on the corner. Yeah, I said, maybe a little too quickly. Anything to give my brain something else to focus on. We sat outside. The weather was warmer than I expected, sunlight hitting the table just right. It should have been one of those easy moments. But I kept noticing things. The way his foot brushed mine under the table and didn't move away. The way he looked at me when I wasn't talking. The way every silence between us felt loaded, not uncomfortable, just aware. You're doing it again, he said. I blinked. Doing what? That thing, he said, taking a sip of his coffee. Where you disappear into your head. I sighed, leaning back slightly. I can't exactly not think about it. Why not? I gave him a look. Seriously? He shrugged. That same calm, unbothered energy. Yeah, it happened. We're here. Nothing exploded. I let out a short laugh. That's your standard? Pretty much. I watched him for a second. Really watched him. How are you so chill about this? I asked. That made him pause. Not long, but enough to notice. Then he set his cup down, eyes flicking back to me. I'm not, he said. That caught me off guard. You're not. He shook his head slightly, a small smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. I'm just better at not freaking out about it. That made more sense than I expected. Still frustrating, but real. We stayed there longer than planned. Talking, not talking, just being there. And slowly, something shifted again. Not back to how it was before, but forward, like we were finding a new version of whatever this was. At one point, as we stood up to leave, our hands brushed again. This time, though, Connor didn't just leave it at that. His fingers caught mine. Lightly, like a question. I looked at him. He didn't say anything, just held my gaze. Waiting. My chest tightened. Not in a bad way. Just real. Because this wasn't the dark anymore. This wasn't hidden. This was daylight. People around us. No excuses. And still, he wasn't pulling away. I hesitated. Just for a second. Then, I let my hand settle in his. Not fully intertwined. But enough. Enough to mean something. Connor's expression didn't change much. But I saw it. That small shift. That quiet confirmation. We didn't hold hands the whole time after that. But we didn't pretend it didn't happen either. And somehow, that felt bigger than anything else. Later that evening, back in the room, things were calmer, more grounded. Connor tossed his keys onto the desk, stretching slightly. Long day, he said. Yeah, I agreed. But neither of us moved right away. There was that same space again, that same awareness. Except now, it wasn't uncertain. It was building. You okay? He asked, glancing at me. I nodded slowly. Yeah. A pause. Then, you? He looked at me for a second, then stepped closer. Not fast, not hesitant, just direct. Yeah, he said quietly. I didn't step back. Didn't overthink it this time. Didn't try to analyze every possible outcome. I just stayed there. Connor reached out, his hand brushing against my side again. Familiar now. Grounding. And somehow that made everything feel simpler. This doesn't feel like just a trip anymore, I admitted. He nodded once. I know. Silence. But not empty. What happens when we go back? I asked. That was the question I'd been avoiding all day. Connor exhaled slowly. Then, we don't pretend this didn't happen. Simple. Again. Always simple with him. I studied his face. Looking for doubt. For hesitation. Didn't find it. Okay, I said. And for the first time since this started, I actually meant it. Because whatever this was, it wasn't staying in this city. And neither were we. The second night felt different. Not because something huge happened right away, but because nothing felt uncertain anymore. That tension from the first night, gone. The hesitation, mostly gone too. What was left was something quieter, but stronger. We didn't go out that evening. Neither of us suggested it. After a full day in the city, it just felt easier to stay and order food, sit around, exist in that space we'd somehow made ours. Connor was on his phone, scrolling through something, while I sat at the edge of the bed, pretending to watch TV. But I wasn't really paying attention. I was aware of him. Always. You're doing it again, he said without looking up. I smirked slightly. At this point, that's just who I am. He glanced over at me. Yeah, he said. I'm starting to notice. There was no edge to it. No teasing. Just acknowledgement. The food came. We ate, talked about random stuff, classes, people back home. Stupid stories that didn't matter. And somehow, that made everything feel more real than anything else. Because this wasn't just tension or moments anymore. This was normal, or at least a new version of it. At some point, Connor moved closer, not making a big deal out of it, just shifting across the bed until he was right next to me, our shoulders touching, then staying there. "You're quiet," he said. "I'm thinking," I replied. Shocking. I nudged him lightly. "Shut up." He laughed under his breath, then leaned back slightly, stretching his arm along the back of the bed behind me. Casual, but not really. After a minute, I leaned back too. And just like that, I was half resting against him. No hesitation this time. No overthinking. Just letting it happen. Neither of us said anything for a while. The TV played in the background, but it was just noise. The real focus was this quiet, steady closeness that didn't feel accidental anymore. "Daniel," he said eventually. "Yeah, you're still worried." It wasn't a question. I sighed softly. "Can you blame me?" He didn't answer right away. Then I felt his hand shift, resting lightly against my side again. "Familiar now. Easy. I get it," he said. "But you're acting like this is gonna fall apart the second we leave." I turned my head slightly to look at him. "And you're acting like it won't." He held my gaze. "Because I don't want it to." That hit. Simple words. But they landed deeper than anything else he'd said so far. I studied him for a second. "You mean that?" He didn't hesitate. "Yeah." There it was again. That certainty. That thing I didn't have, but somehow trusted when it came from him. I exhaled slowly, letting some of that tension go. "Okay," I said. And this time, it didn't feel like I was just going along with it. It felt like a choice. Connor's hand shifted slightly, fingers pressing just a little more firmly against my side. Not pushing, just grounding. "You don't have to figure everything out right now," he said quietly. "I know, but you're going to anyway." I huffed a small laugh. "Probably." He smiled at that. Then, after a second, his hand moved, sliding up slightly, slower this time. Not rushed, not uncertain, just natural. I didn't tense, didn't pull away. If anything, I leaned into him a little more. And that was all the confirmation he needed. The moment didn't explode into something overwhelming. It didn't have to. It stayed controlled, close, intentional, like we both understood that this wasn't about rushing anything. It was about building it properly. Later, when we finally lay down, it didn't feel awkward anymore. No careful distance. No pretending. Connor pulled me closer without asking. And this time, I didn't even think about it. I just let myself settle there. "Better," he murmured. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. "Yeah." And for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't thinking about what could go wrong. I wasn't stuck in my head. I wasn't trying to predict the future. I was just there, with him. And somehow, that was enough. The next day, we'd have to leave. Go back home. Back to everything waiting for us there. But lying there, in that quiet moment, I realized something. This wasn't ending when the trip ended. Not for me. And judging by the way Connor held on to me, not for him either. The last morning came too fast. I woke up before Connor this time. The room was quiet. That soft, early light coming through the curtains again, but everything felt different now. He was still asleep beside me, one arm loosely around me like it had just stayed there overnight without question. And for a second, I just lay there, not moving, just taking it in. Because this was the part I'd been avoiding. Going back. Connor shifted slightly, his grip tightening for a second before he exhaled and relaxed again. I glanced at him. He looked completely at ease. Like none of this was complicated. Like waking up like this with me was just normal. "Stop thinking." His voice was rough with sleep. I huffed quietly. I didn't say anything. "You didn't have to." I rolled my eyes a little, but didn't pull away. "Yeah, well, we're leaving today." That got his attention. He opened his eyes, looking at me properly now. I know. There was a pause. Not awkward. Just real. I shifted slightly, sitting up, running a hand through my hair. "This is where it gets weird," I muttered. Connor pushed himself up too, leaning back against the headboard. "Only if you make it weird." I glanced at him. "You seriously don't think this is a big deal?" He held my gaze. "I think it is," he said. "I just don't think that means it has to be a problem." I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this could go wrong. Friends, group dynamics. What happens when people find out? What happens if it doesn't work? All of it. But instead, I just said, "I don't want to lose this." Connor's expression shifted slightly at that. Softer. You won't, he said. You don't know that. I do. He replied, more firmly this time. I let out a slow breath, looking down at my hands. You're very confident. He smirked slightly. Someone has to be. That made me laugh. Quiet, but real. And just like that, some of the weight lifted. We got ready in that same quiet rhythm we'd fallen into. No rushing. No pretending. Just normal movements, occasional glances, small moments that felt bigger than they should have. When we checked out of the hotel, something in my chest tightened. Not because I regretted anything, but because this room, had become something more than just a stop on a trip. The drive back was quieter than the way there. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Connor drove again, one hand on the wheel like before. But this time, every now and then, his other hand would rest near mine. Not quite touching, just close. Halfway through the drive, I finally said it. So what are we then? Connor didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on the road, thinking. Then, we're us. I frowned slightly. That's not an answer. It is, he said. I waited. He exhaled softly. I don't want to label it just to feel like we understand it, he continued. I want to actually see what it is. That was very frustrating, but also kind of exactly what I needed to hear. So we just go with it? I asked. He glanced at me briefly. Yeah. I leaned back in my seat, staring out the window. The city getting closer. Reality creeping back in. Okay, I said. And this time, there wasn't hesitation behind it. When we finally got back, everything looked the same. Same streets, same buildings, same routine waiting for us. But I didn't feel the same. As we parked, Connor turned off the engine, then looked at me. Hey. I met his gaze. We're not pretending this didn't happen, he said again. I nodded slowly. I know. A small pause. Then, good. Neither of us moved right away. Like we both knew this was another one of those moments. A line. Not an ending, but a shift. And as I sat there, looking at him, I realized something. This wasn't just a trip. It wasn't just a moment. And it definitely wasn't something I could ignore anymore. This was real. And whatever came next, we were already in it. The first few days after we got back felt unreal. Not in a dramatic way. Just in that quiet, slightly disorienting way where everything looks the same, but you know something isn't. Campus was exactly how we left it. Same people, same routines, same noise. But every time I saw Connor across a room or heard his voice somewhere nearby, it hit differently. At first, we didn't make it obvious. Not because we were hiding, just adjusting. Figuring out what this actually was outside of that hotel room. Outside of that city where it felt like we were in our own little world. But it didn't take long before things started slipping through. Small things. The way we'd automatically end up next to each other. The way conversations between us lasted a little longer than with anyone else. The way he'd look at me like he knew something no one else did. Something's up with you too. It was one of our friends who said it first. Half joking, but not really. I felt it instantly, that old instinct to deflect, to brush it off. But Connor didn't even hesitate. What makes you say that? He asked casually. Just vibes, our friend shrugged. Connor smirked slightly. Maybe you're just observant. That was it. No denial. No explanation. Just enough to confirm something without saying it outright. Later, when we were alone, I looked at him. You're not even trying to hide it. He shrugged. I'm not ashamed of it. That wasn't the issue. But hearing him say that still did something to me. I just don't want things to get weird, I admitted. Connor stepped a little closer, not crowding, just enough. Are they weird for you? I thought about it. Really thought. Because yeah, this was new. Unexpected. Different from anything I'd planned. But weird? No, I said finally. He nodded once. Then that's all that matters. And somehow, it started to feel that way. Weeks passed. And instead of falling apart, things settled. Not perfectly. We had moments. Misunderstandings. Differences in how we handled things. Me overthinking. Him not thinking enough. But we figured it out. Slowly, naturally. Like we had in that room. One night, a few weeks later, we ended up back at my place. Nothing special. Just tired after a long day, sitting on the couch, the TV on but ignored. Connor was leaning back, relaxed as always. I was next to him, closer than I would have been before all of this, but now it just felt normal. You still overthinking? He asked. I smirked slightly. Less. Progress. I glanced at him. You still pretending you don't think about anything? He grinned. Never said that. There was a pause. A good one. You ever think about that trip? I asked. Connor didn't answer right away. Then, yeah, I nodded slightly. Me too, because that was where everything changed. Not just because of what happened, but because of what we didn't do after. We didn't ignore it. We didn't pretend. We didn't run from it. We stayed. Connor shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing mine. You regret it? He asked. I didn't even need a second to think. No. He nodded. Good. Silence again, but not empty. I leaned back slightly, letting myself relax fully this time. Not tense, not guarded, just there. And as I sat there, with him, I realized something simple. Something that probably would have terrified me before. I didn't know exactly what this was. Didn't have a label for it. Didn't know where it would end up. But I didn't need to. Because whatever it was real. And for once, that was enough.